Hello, sports fans. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you for stopping by our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe and notifications toggle so you never miss a thing. All of our content up here every day. Looking forward to it. Thank you, and we'll see you on the radio.
Brought to you by the Hard Truth Distilling Company in Brown County, Indiana.
So for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, time!
3 on the way. Oh! It went in! It went in! And Indiana wins the ball game!
Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni!
Float game for the win! Ayler's gone. Goodbye. Touchdown, Indy. Woo! IU! America! They got a football team now!
Pretty simple. I win. Google me.
You know that I'm the cream of the crop.
Now, from the Hard Truth Studios, here's Jim Coyle.
Welcome back to the Hard Truth Distilling Company Studios. Alec Lasley joining us now with the Pacers cap on. Where were you the other night? They needed somebody to block out, man.
Yeah, didn't they ever? That was a phenomenal fourth quarter, fun second half. But obviously, I think the Bulls made up for it last night with their buzzer beater in return for the Lakers. So I think they got what they deserved on that one.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that ball keeps on bouncing. But this weekend, there'll be it's all I've been talking about all day. There's just a ton of hoops going on in Indianapolis between the state finals and the NCAA regional, and you've got Matt Painter versus Kelvin Sampson. First of all, you could just stop right there with that statement and let it go on its own. It'll be very interesting. I don't see Purdue being able to handle Houston, but that's why they play the games.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it'll be a fun game. It'll be a good game. I think Houston's a little bit too tough for Purdue, too long and athletic on the perimeter. I think that's been the downfall, right, in all the games that Purdue has lost, even dating back to last year. Is just the inability at times for Fletcher Lawyer to really get going against more athletic and longer perimeter players. You know what Braden Smith is going to do, so that's not going to be an issue, right? If Trey Kaufman-Renn stays out of foul trouble, that's probably going to help Purdue, obviously, in the long run there. But I just think you need to get some sort of production out of Fletcher Lawyer at a consistent rate from start to finish tonight in order to be able to come out with the win. And unfortunately, I just don't think a lot of people have the confidence in him to do that when you go up against teams like this that force him to put the ball on the floor, force him to get to the rim. He just doesn't have the strength and he's a tough kid, but he doesn't have the sheer toughness to get through contact and finish at the rim. And I think that's where he sometimes struggles. That's where this Purdue team struggles. And obviously, if Kaufman-Renn's going to be in foul trouble, then it doesn't matter what, in my opinion, what the other two guards do. Houston's going to come out with that one. So it'll be interesting. I think it'll be a close game for a while, but I think Houston's just going to wear Purdue down pretty much towards the end of this one.
And as Darren DeVries is putting his staff together, one of the names that was banded around, of course, Corey Barnett, because of previous IU player, previous IU staffer, but he had been interviewing for head coaching jobs, and Cooley whistles off of the hotline, says that he just took a head coaching job, so you can cross him off of the list. But also earlier when talking with Todd, that one of the names that is still around, Mark Adams, who Bloomington South High School graduate, who his family, a great connections throughout AAU and the Indiana high school scenes. He's been an assistant for some time. He's at Cincinnati currently. So that's a name I would not be surprised to see coming to Indiana. It may already be a done deal. And talking with Zach, because, and we all know, things are not always announced when they're being done. It's until you know they're done, especially on staffers. They have to be vetted and go through the background checks and all of that. That's why you don't see official announcements a lot of time until even after you've already heard about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Drew Adams is a phenomenal potential addition, right, to this staff. I mean, he worked under Steve Alford as well, right? So you have not only his ties to the program to begin with, but having that ability to be from Bloomington, be from the state of Indiana. I think we get tied up a little bit too much in having head coaches with the state of Indiana pull. And I think it's okay not to have that, as long as you build a staff that's going to have some sort of connections here. Obviously, Darren DeVries already has connections in the Midwest, but having a guy like Drew Adams potentially on the staff is only going to bolster that. And I think it's a very good potential hire, right? If he does end up coming over from Cincinnati. Has all the ties in the world, right, locally, but even more so, right, in the Midwest, and even more so now since he's been at Cincinnati. So we're probably not going to hear, one-off staff additions until everything is finalized. And I'm sure Zach talked about it too, right? It's probably going to be once everything is fully set in stone, you're going to make those additions and make those announcements. But, let's not get it twisted. There's probably the majority of the staff already put together. If not most of it, definitely, a few guys that are probably already out on the recruiting trail that are just doing it through back channels. So I would probably expect something here in the next week before too long here.
And it's possible a guy might still be working at the moment. And I mistakenly said Mark, his dad. It's Drew Adams. Apologize for that. Both of those names, though, have been around in Indiana basketball, the state for quite some time. Portal. The portal is live and happening. Every time somebody enters it, people like, oh, so-and-so's in the portal. Man, it's going, you could do that all day with yourself if you wanted to, because there are just going to be tons and tons of names that are in the portal. But what are some of the names that you have seen that kind of gets your attention?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one right off the bat that went in this morning, Ryan Conwell. Obviously, everyone is familiar with his game. Everyone familiar with the name as well. Pike High School kid, obviously went to South Florida to get his career started, but don't think a lot of people remember that aspect of him. They remember him obviously from last year, the run that Indiana State had, and then obviously joining Sean Miller at Xavier for this season. A guy who showed that he can play at this level. Phenomenal two-way guard, but more so phenomenal scoring guard that Indiana has not had at that position in quite some time. So I think he's the one guy that you probably look at the most. Would be able to come in, play, pretty much immediately with Tucker DeVries, both on and off the ball. Having that kind of duo in your backcourt immediately sets you up for success, to not even looking at what the rest of the potential roster would look like. There's a couple other guys on Xavier that we'll kind of see what happens and see potentially where, they would end up. But outside of that, I think there's still a ton of names that have obviously yet to enter the portal. We all know that probably over the next 2 weeks, right, we're going to see a heck of a lot more names come out. But I think the big name is definitely Ryan Conwell. I think it's once you get Tucker in the fold, once you get potentially another guard, we'll see what happens. But obviously the one that's probably closest to making any sort of commitment is Connor Enright from DePaul. Played obviously at Drake for 2 years under DeVries, so knows the system, knows the scheme, knows exactly what Darren DeVries wants out of a point guard. Now, a lot of people probably just look at the stats, look at the shooting percentage last year, and are probably a little bit turned off by what he potentially could provide. But this is a guy that's a veteran, played a lot of college basketball over his 3 years up to this point, had a good year at DePaul, maybe not shooting the ball the way that he would like, but the year before at Drake, again, in a Darren DeVries system, shot about 37-38% from three. So he's a guy who's shown the ability to do that. But more importantly, can run this team averaged about 6.5, 7 assists a game, and had a assist rate of 37.5%. And when you look at what Trey Galloway did last year, had an assist rate of 29%, right? So if you're going to add 10% onto what Trey Galloway was already able to do from kind of a point guard facilitating perspective, that's a phenomenal addition, especially when you look at what Darren DeVries wants out of his offense, which is space the floor, get a lot of shooters, and you're going to need someone who can obviously facilitate the offense there. So I think you look at those kind of two guys right off the bat, Connor Enright and then Ryan Conwell as two potential additions. I think you're probably leaning a lot more towards the Connor Enright side right now, just because he does have a visit set up for next Tuesday, and will likely be a relatively short, kind of recruiting cycle after that. Iowa probably the only other team that you really have to worry about at that point, but it does appear that Indiana is going to get the second visit, and probably what will end up being the final visit. It looks like it probably will come down to potentially Iowa or Indiana at this point for him.
And what exactly is it that Darren DeVries is looking for in players right now for his system?
Yeah, I mean, I think he said it, right? I mean, shooters. He said specifically he wants depth at the shooting position. So, right, if you potentially look at what you could have just right off the bat, right, who knows what's going to happen with Luke Goody, but let's just say that you do get a waiver from him, right? So that's one shooter. Tucker DeVries is another shooter. There's a reason they're going after, again, a facilitating point guard in Connor Enright, who may or may not start for this team, but play significant minutes if he does end up coming to Indiana. Outside of that, I mean, he's had physical forwards, but always guys who can step out and play a little bit on the perimeter. He said that he wants to score right in the first 12 seconds of the shot clock. When they do get the ball, he's a guy who wants to push the pace, not necessarily every single time they get the ball and scoring a transition, but he wants to be able to score in at least the secondary break, right? And the only way that you do that is get the ball up the floor and look to score in those first 10 to 15 seconds of the shot clock. So you're probably going to be looking at a team that's probably a little bit smaller in size, but more physical, and a team that's going to be able to play a lot more true kind of 4 around 1 or even 5 out at times, while still not losing any of that physicality in the paint necessarily.
And that is going to be a product that I think Indiana fans are going to welcome. And all the judging that is going on right now, I just sit back and I'm like, all right, I know I am not an expert on coaching because I don't know everything that is going on with them or has. And I do not understand why fans are not a little more accepting of this decision. Most are, but there's always going to be a dissatisfied faction, and most of that is the Chris Beard crowd, I think. But that's just my thoughts on it. But I think that this is a good hire. It is a solid hire, and it's a hire that comes without baggage. It's a hire that allows Indiana to start fresh and clean and start off very well. He is a very well-liked guy. He has a good personality. And that's, boy, the last 2 coaches did not have, he's a recruiter. He's a grinder. Both of the last 2 coaches had neither of those qualities that he has.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he has a great mix of his personality, right, being there, which is something that Archie Miller didn't have. And I thought Archie Miller had kind of the X's and O's when he did talk, right? And then you go to Mike Woodson. Mike Woodson probably had a little bit too much personality and didn't have the X's and O's when he was discussing everything. He said the same thing almost every post-game press conference, and very rarely got into kind of the nitty-gritty details of what he was actually trying to run. I mean, we already know, what Darren DeVries wants to do, how he wants to build a team. He was very, very specific with it. But I think the bigger thing is, he's very comfortable with who he is, and he's not. He doesn't think this job is too big for him, right? I think that was one very significant part of why Archie Miller failed. Is I think he was nervous to fail in that role. I don't think Darren DeVries has that sort of kind of nervous, anxious energy. I mean, he has pretty much built his entire career for a job like this. And he has very, very similar personalities to Kurt Signetti, right? And when you look at what Scott Dolson's been able to do, you build the football program based off of a guy who has proven that he can win at every single level, but more importantly, has had success as a coordinator at the Power 4 level, right? I mean, obviously working under Nick Saban and what he was able to do, but more importantly, learning from a lot of those guys. That was why I was never a huge fan of what Ben McCollum was going to bring, because he had never had any sort of Power 4 experience, even as an assistant coach, not even mid-major experience before the Drake job. So when you look at actually comparing resumes, I think that's one thing that you can really kind of pinpoint what Darren DeVries has. Obviously, learning under Dana Altman, who's done a phenomenal job wherever he's been, but more specifically, right, more recently at Oregon. And then obviously what he was able to learn under McDermott at Creighton after Dana Altman left. And every single coach, I know, they're always going to say this, but every single coach has been raving about keeping Darren DeVries as an assistant, and how that was, the top decision that they ever made, and the best choice that they ever made. And one thing with that is you learn along the way, yeah, but you learn what doesn't work before you actually go and then are able to throw that in as a head coach. So I think it's a hire that is going to pay dividends for this program, because he's ready for this moment, but more importantly, he has the experience and has the network that has really helped him grow and learn from, maybe some of these other mistakes that the other head coaches probably wouldn't have learned from up until this point.
Exactly. And I'm looking forward to seeing the team once it finally does come together. And Michael made a great comment on the hotline a bit ago, and I can't pull it back up, but I can tell you what it said was that, last year, when Dusty May took over, it was like 4 weeks before he signed his first player. These guys are just entering the portal. There are visits to make. There's some vetting that the coaches have to do of the players. It's just not a bang bang thing. Now, some of these players probably will be quicker than other, like the Connor Enright, because that's kind of probably started a little bit farther down the line than we really know. But that's the biggest reason, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, look, some of these conversations with recruits obviously have already been happening. Some are going to obviously continue to happen through agents before they even are officially in the portal too. But the bigger thing is, just because they haven't, officially announced anything doesn't mean that they're not, at the 1-inch line. A lot of these guys obviously have the relationships before they even enter the portal and are going to commit right on the spot. There's other guys that take a lot longer because they want to see kind of how the roster actually turns out and how it plays out. But, specifically for Indiana, it's been 1 week and a few days on the job. I don't think anyone's too worried. They shouldn't be, especially when you already know you're going to have a guy in Tucker DeVries coming with. So you already have a good kind of backbone and foundation of what potentially your roster can be there from at least that standpoint. And there's 1,200 players in the portal right now. There's going to be a couple hundred more, if not 1,000, right, that enter in the next 3 weeks. So if you see guys committing, that's great. Just know that there's probably bigger fish that are going to be coming here pretty soon. And let's be honest, there haven't been a ton of commitments. There's been a whole bunch of names entered, but there have not been a ton of commitments up to this point. So it's not like, Indiana's way behind the ball with any of this. There, if anything, probably, already know 4 or 5 guys that are probably going to be coming and are just kind of finalizing information here.
I also think that this year, a lot of players are going to have much bigger NIL expectations. And that's part of what we're going to see, why it stretches things out a little bit. I saw earlier someone's posted that a New Mexico player entered the portal is allegedly asking for $3 million. And that's going to happen. And that's going to lead to either people not being interested or negotiations, because most places are not just going to hand you a $3 million check. There's just so much that's going to have to go through that'll probably slow the process down as well. But I also believe that a coach like Darren DeVries is going probably not deal with those kinds of players. Not that there won't be negotiations for guys, but guys that are just asking for the world right off the bat, that tells you that it's more about me than we, which I understand that there is an aspect to that, and you have to look out for yourself. I get it, and I understand that. But you also have to, there's a balance, and that balance becomes pretty apparent in how you handle yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, he even talked about it in his introductory press conference, right? I mean, he said that there's probably times where his assistant coaches have been upset that they haven't taken a player if they bring him basically to him on a silver platter, because it just doesn't fit with the standard or the culture that he wants to build, right? So he's very nitpicky about how he builds his roster, but he's also built his roster from scratch multiple different times now. So he knows how to put together a winning team in year one. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just have some patience with kind of this entire process, because again, Indiana by no means is behind the eight ball here. There are a ton of programs that haven't landed a commitment yet. There are obviously still programs that haven't even had guys enter the portal yet. And there's still different scenarios that need to play out for a lot of these things to become official. So just because people haven't announced anything doesn't mean that that's not someone who's going to be coming at this point. But again, Darren DeVries is going to be very specific with how he builds his roster. And I think he should have the leash to be able to do that, because he's proven to be able to flip rosters with 9, 10, 11 newcomers and win right away. So it's all about how he wants to build that locker room. And he's proven that he's been able to do that by, kind of handpicking and cherry picking specifically what those characteristics are.
Five Left says he hopes DeVries finds a new lead recruiter. Ostrom was terrible with Archie. Well, yeah, I've said over and over that Tom Ostrom will not be coming to Bloomington. I don't have any inside information on that, but I would be more than shocked to see that happen, especially on top of the names that I've already talked about today, as far as his staff would go. And I just think that he's going – I don't understand why there's so much doubt, other than because Indiana fans have gone through what they've gone through with the previous coaches. But if you look at what Darren DeVries has done, he's been successful. He's built programs. He built that Drake program. It wasn't Ben McCollum that built that Drake program. He goes to West Virginia, inherits a last place team, picked to finish last again, and basically had them in the tournament in year one. They got screwed out of it, but he had them there. So there's a bunch of discussion on the hotline about whether he'll make it in year one. Yes, it should always be the expectation to make the tournament. And yes, I would expect that they make the NCAA tournament next year. That's always your goal. Year one, year 15. It doesn't matter to me, because he's going to put together a team every year. So just because it happens to be his first year, I don't think that's going to be a lot different. There will be some differences when you're already there, yeah. But he still has to put a team together like he did at West Virginia, and I don't think it's more difficult to do at Indiana than it was at West Virginia.
Yeah, and I mean, the resources that he's going to have at Indiana are going to be far and along greater than what he's ever experienced. And he talked about that, right? I mean, Scott Dolson talked about it, but more so, Darren DeVries talked about having the resources readily available from day one is something that, he's never really had. He has everything that he could possibly imagine, but he also understands that, the resources aren't what goes out and wins games. It gives him the ability to go win games and be able to produce, but he has everything at his fingertips to be able to succeed. He's proven that he can succeed with a lot less. So to have doubt with what he should be able to bring Indiana should be a moot point. I mean, I think everyone is just so hung up on the fact that, he's not the sexy name. He's not the Brad Stevens name. He's not the, Scott Drew or whatever any other, person wanted from their head coach. But at the end of the day, sometimes those sexy names and sometimes those hot up and comers don't always work out. And you need to go back to, again, a proven track record, a guy who's won everywhere, and more specifically fits the DNA of what, Scott Dolson has looked at for what he's wanted to hire. Obviously, I think you have very, very similar comparisons with Kurt Signetti, and I think that's what people need to look at moving forward is, the terminology that they both use, the process-oriented type of system that they're going to run is very similar. And, for Darren DeVries, he's a guy that's going to look at it as a day at a time. He came in and he even obviously said he's not going to say we're going to win X amount of games. We're not going to win X amount of championships. It's all about winning every single day. And that's exactly, what Kurt Signetti said. And obviously we saw what happened there. But, Indiana fans, they don't need to be – patience not the right word, but they need to be patient in the early stages here over the next month or so, because everything isn't just going to fall onto a silver platter, right? It's going to take some time to build the entire roster. And games aren't won in the next 6 months, right? Games are won in November and December and in January. And too many times I think people are getting hung up on winning the offseason. And yeah, you can win it to a certain extent, but no one knows how these rosters are going to look like in, 7-8 months from now when teams are actually on the floor. And we saw last year that Indiana can put together a heck of a transfer portal class and win all those awards and accolades, but it doesn't work when it's on the court.
And having a little side conversation in there about some apathy amongst some Chris Beard fans, which I kind of just say you got to let that go. It's that ship was never ever even in port, but it has sailed. It sailed right on by.
It only came back up because they obviously took down Iowa State. They took down the hot team in Carolina right ending the year, and now they're still playing. That's the only reason. But I mean, again, this is people need to get that out of their mind that he may have wanted to come to Indiana, but Indiana was never going to give him a second of looks here, and Indiana got the guy that they needed to get, and Chris Beard is never someone that you should probably want associated with your program.
Absolutely. And the expectations for winning will be there. But we'll let them play out. Just like this weekend, man. The games tonight, Purdue, Houston, Kentucky, Tennessee. Oh, there's great ones. Appreciate you, my friend. Look forward to talking to you. You'll be back with us on Tuesday with a major announcement that you have to make.
As do you.
Teasing it just a little bit. You guys have a great weekend, brother. Enjoy the games.
Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Alec Lasley joining us here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Hello, sports fans. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you for stopping by our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe and notifications toggle so you never miss a thing. All of our content up here every day. Looking forward to it. Thank you, and we'll see you on the radio.